Hey guys, it's Will.
Hey guys, it's Becky.
Hey, have you ever felt like you were growing at a different pace than your partner? I think you felt that way before.
I might have felt that way once or twice before.
We'll be talking about that today. But hey, Beck, why do we do this?
So, first off, I'd like you to stop and just recognize my hairdo
Her
today.
hair looks pretty darn good, doesn't it?
Sorry, guys. So, the reason that we do this is honestly because we want to share our journey with you of kind of what we're going through, what we've been through as far as our growth. But the reason we want to share that is not just because we want to share that, but we want to share that because we want you to encourage you and help you to kind of break the cycle of whatever that looks like in your life. And we'll talk a little bit about how that's improved in ours too.
Yeah, exactly. So, today we're going to continue our series on the Rise Business Conference. That's an experience that we got to do together because it was actually our first business conference together.
Yeah.
Though we've done a ton of them
Right.
during the course of our, growth journey.
Right.
It's the first time we actually did it as a couple. It was
Yeah,
pretty
it's so
amazing.
funny because we'd always talked about doing something like that
Yeah.
together, and then we would one or the other would go to a conference, and then we'd come home and we'd be like, "Oh, let me tell you all the things," and then we would tell each other all the things, but we really wanted to share it, and then I don't know, the way I felt with this one is we have come back and done more
In
with this conference than anything
by
else.
far, not even close.
And I don't know about you, but this is my favorite one.
This was, I would say it's my favorite one too, because I got to do it with you, frankly.
I don't think
I'm
that's
trying to
the
get
only reason here.
No, but it was pretty awesome. It was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So we're gonna talk about really this series today, or episode is about Dave Hollis, right? So he was one of the speakers. This is Rachel Hollis's husband.
Right.
How
did you guess?
Yeah, right, like the name. And he happens to be the CEO of the Hollis Co.
Not at first though, remember?
No, it didn't start that way. We'll get there as well.
Right,
So,
sorry.
but before we get into it, hey, we just want to, if you like what you're hearing, please share, like,
Absolutely.
subscribe.
Yep.
I think it'll be very helpful. Comment, right? Let us know what you want to hear more about, less about. Want to get your feedback. So,
Yeah.
But yeah, we got to listen to Dave, right? And that was pretty powerful. And it was actually this one actually drove probably a lot more conversation from a relationship standpoint.
I agree with
than
that.
I think any of the other speakers
Yeah.
that we had during the course of the
Because
conference.
he has a unique perspective on it, right?
Yeah, he does.
But what's so funny is if I'm being completely honest, this is the one that I was because he was the MC. So I was oh, he's just gonna get up there and kind of fill in some space.
Yeah.
And no, he brought
He laid
his
it out.
game.
Yeah, he laid it out there. So it was
He
really,
did.
really awesome.
Yeah.
Really.
So as always, what you'll see is as we go throughout the video, we want to share with you guys 4 points that we got forward progress. And then we'll kind of give you a call to action or a challenge, if you will, at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's the first one?
Well, where do you start?
Point
Or
one.
let's say, where should you start?
Yeah.
With you?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good place to start.
Yeah.
That's a hard place to start, though,
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah. So the first point he's talking about is hey, work on you.
Yeah. I think, I don't know, guys, some of us, that's super, super easy, right? I think, I don't even know when I started, being curious and trying to learn more and, really kind of diving into, okay, what in the world? Who am I? What's important to me? I would say, I don't know, maybe forever, but at least, as, teenager and, early college, I've always just been curious about what makes people tick. Why do I do that? Why do you do that? Tell me about you. When did you start getting curious about that?
Well, I love this one, right? Because I think the aha moment that we had for us is that we've kind of been at different paces of our growth journey for different things, whether it's from a religion standpoint, we've noticed that. From a business standpoint, from an entrepreneurial standpoint, which has been kind of the biggest pain point for us in recent years.
One of them.
And but I think what we've found during all of those times is that we needed to kind of work on ourselves, right? Versus pushing things on each other, right? And and I think for me, I've been at different places in how I wanted to develop personally,
right?
But I think that's been the biggest aha for this one, right?
Yeah. And it's funny because, like, I would say, like, I've heard Rachel talk about kind of her side of this for a
Yeah.
really long time. Like, she's talked about it in her videos, she's talked about it in both of her books.
Yeah.
So I think, like, hearing his side of it was a little bit eye-opening to me, because I was like, oh, yeah, maybe there's something to that. Because I think for me, like, I've always been curious about, like, being the better me, like, in personal and professional and all around, like, from a holistic perspective. And I don't want to speak for you, but I feel like for you, it's been, like, more about, like, let me build myself professionally.
Yeah.
Instead of.
Yeah, and I think that has been, right? And that was kind of like, I really connected with Dave's story, because it was very much like my story, where
similar,
I was very focused on the professional side.
And you still are.
And I still am, right? But he spent a lot of time there, right? And that's kind of where he was developing, he was growing.
Right.
He didn't quite understand this thing that his wife was going through, which, and it's maybe in some cases felt like a side hustle or a side thing. And
yeah,
it really
it was for
right,
years.
his business, right? Or working and being in the professional, pay the bills.
Yeah.
So essentially that kind of has mirrored kind of our growth path and journey. And at times, like, even for me, when she would push, and this is would push certain things,
Surely
I'm like, look, take it easy. I've got my thing going on, right?
Yeah.
So I think that has been, and then sometimes I would get kind of somewhat frustrated. I'm like, let me do my own thing.
And vice versa, right? There's
Right.
times that I'd be like, this is me, like, you do you, but do it faster.
Yeah.
Figure it out quicker.
Or at times, right, like, why aren't you growing at my same professional pace, right?
Yeah.
And then you're thinking, for me, it's like, well, aren't you growing in this entrepreneurial space that I want you to grow in at the pace that I'm growing?
Yeah. Well, for us, though, I think, like, as we, during our time in Canada, I think that there was a lot of that where, like, I had worked full time, up until we moved to Canada. And then when we moved, then I went out on my own coaching. And I think then, like, I'd always had, like, this desire, we'll say, to, like, work for myself, like, you name anything, and I would say that I've probably tried it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think it really has been, just that I've always just kind of felt that tug to work for myself. And I don't know that that's something necessarily that you've always felt, right?
No, I haven't. And frankly, it was, I would say I've got to give Beck a lot of credit, because over the years,
thank you.
She's been kind of that person in the background, right, feeding me books and feeding me, podcasts and whatnot. And it's kind of funny, because then I listen to it and be like, oh, this is a great idea I came up with, which she'd get frustrated, because it's like, I've been talking to you about this.
You did not come up with that. That was totally me.
But I would implement it in my business and at work or whatnot. So, but I think that's been kind of a neat experience that I kind of was working on myself in a way, but she was planting seeds that I was eventually kind of, allowing to plant and water and eventually kind of grow into some ideas.
You know what, though, about that is that I would say, like, that's made me a better coach, right? Because, like, I've seen, like, as I've read the books or, like, heard of this theory or that theory or got super excited about it and told you about, then, like, he'll go to work and, like, put it into effect and then come home and, like, give me the results. I'm like, gosh, I have, like, my own, like, test lab here. This really works.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly
so I think
right.
it has made me a better coach. So,
it has. But she started hitting on something. So, like, we just talked about, hey, like, work on you, right? So there's a little bit of, like, hey, as you're growing, fill yourself with all the knowledge and all the insights and the experiences. And it's not to say that you're not going to do it together as a couple, but if you're not growing at the same pace, like, just work on you, right? Become a better you.
Absolutely.
And share that, yes, right?
Yeah.
And don't do it in a silo or whatnot, but also just don't do it in such a way where you're gonna expect something to be reciprocated if the person's not really ready for it,
there yet.
right? So I think that's one. But then you transition into something which is good, which is, hey, give each other space to grow.
Yeah, so that's point 2.
That's point 2. Yeah. And then this is kind of where you talk about, like, our Canada experience, right? I think for me, that was my space for both of us to grow, right?
Yeah, but in different ways. Like, I would say, like, because I was there and having to work for myself, like, I think, like, that was fulfilling that, like, super, like, that desire that I've had for so long. But I think you then saw, like, oh, this is working, and, like, I can see, like, the fulfillment that she's getting, and, like, and how much she's learning too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It was amazing, and I think like for me that experience was I call it as somewhat of an awakening.
Definitely.
Where it was the first time I realized that I was kind of just going through the motions, right?
Like
I was on autopilot. Yeah, is the term I like to use. Yeah. And it was the one unique experience because you're learning a new language because we were in Quebec, right, on the French Canadian side. We're learning a new language, learning a new culture, learning a new environment, learning a new system, literally like economic system, everything, right? Everything was new.
Right.
But it forced you to realize that you had to live intentionally.
Like in the moment.
In the moment, and being intentional and experiencing and welcoming it. And that's kind of really what she's been telling me forever, right? Which is, we need to live more intentional. We need to be much more intentional.
Which I didn't know that. Like I went through like some of my training that I'd been going through, coaching and yoga. Like it just really kind of got that like super intentional in me. Like started planting the seeds in me just a little bit sooner than you, I think. But I noticed, especially in Canada, we did this so well. Of like we were being very deliberate on like, you know, making sure that we were doing all the things, right? Like we were just super intentional about it. We rented there, so we didn't have like a lot of
have all like the
we didn't have a lot of the
stuff
responsibility, I'll say, of owning your own house. And we intentionally went super simple on like what all we had there. Which is something we should.
But intentional about what we wanted to learn, what we wanted to experience, where do we want to
go,
how
we wanted to go,
who we wanted to meet, you know, how we wanted to connect with people, how quickly we wanted to connect with people.
Right.
So like
We're super intentional
all of those
about
were really important. And I think in that 2-year span, I think we grew tremendously.
Absolutely.
And I think the other aspect of that experience, which is kind of this third point, which is build each other up.
Yeah.
Right. It was the one place where like you say it all the time, which is like we felt the closest, right?
Absolutely. Well, and I think too, like, you know, with both the point 2 and point 3 of giving each other space to grow, like, dude, I'm gonna be honest, there was days that I was like, you just don't get it, right? Like, why are you not here yet? So I think for me, that was something that was really, really critical. And actually, if I'm not mistaken, you heard it listening to Dave and Rachel Hollis.
Oh yeah.
And like what they were talking about, like when she has a bad day, he lifts her up. Yep. And when he has a bad day, she lifts him up. Instead of like, you know, when one person has a bad day, it's super, super easy to be like, I know, this stinks.
Or you get frustrated because they're having a bad day, you were having a good day, and now it's like, why, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, why are you raining on my day?
Yeah, why are you mad? Exactly. Versus like trying to build that person up and see it from their perspective. And
absolutely.
Which is, because before it wasn't like we were just, oh geez, having a bad day, I would kind of walk away and kind of go in my man cave.
Right. Well, and I think that's too, like, I don't know if I've shared this online, but I've shared this with a lot of people. Like, we went how many years before we actually even fought, because, like, even having an argument, because literally we would get to the point that we would, like, just totally walk away. Like you said, like, if he's in the man cave and I'm, you know, downstairs cooking
like,
or doing,
I'm not dealing with that.
And so I think that, though, we have to give each other space in that, but we've got to allow each other to grow at our own pace.
Right.
But encourage each other too, right? Like, I think that was, and I think, you know, when you get to that pivotal moment, I think too, like, we got super curious on why we hadn't, like, just confronted things front on. Yeah. And it was because just the past that we had seen and grown up in that, you know,
we just never saw anybody model it.
Yeah.
Right? And we had to kind of learn it ourselves. And this is kind of one of the points that Beck made earlier, which is why what do we have passion for? Like, we want to help you break the cycle. And many of us don't know how to break the cycle because we never had that person or that example, right, to help us kind of break through that. And we've had to literally figure that out on our own, or learning from people and getting insight, like, oh, this is how they do it. Let's try it. And frankly, it's painful at times, been, it still is at times, but we're still figuring it out because, you know, we both come from, you know, places where we just didn't have the greatest examples, right? Not that the people around us were awesome and loving and caring, but maybe didn't teach us really how to, like, navigate through some of these things. And you have to figure it out yourself.
Well, and I always say, like, you know, when people look back at their past, like, you know, it's always like, well, you know, was it from a parenting perspective? And I say, like, for me, Like, no, because like generally speaking, people do the best they know how to do.
Yeah.
Right.
That's right.
And it's not, for us, it's not about like talking about this breaking the cycle to diminish, the effort that anyone has put in. I don't know. I think we turned out pretty damn good.
I think we did, right?
But
I
we're
think
from
it is
broken families.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Where
But it's like
that's
you can make that an excuse.
Right.
Or you can just, and this is what's important, right?
Yeah.
Like where people get stuck is it's not so much their environment, but it's the fact that they don't want to even change their environment. And sometimes changing their environment, it's about learning and growing and expanding and increasing their knowledge base.
Absolutely.
And sometimes, yes, it's physically changing your environment to help you with that. Sometimes it's physically, or it's emotionally or intellectually changing kind of your viewpoint by just absorbing something that's from a different perspective.
Absolutely. And you know what, like even as I'm thinking about us going through these points, like I don't know, like I feel like I want to kind of take a
pause it
just for a second and to get a little bit more granular on what do we mean when we say working on you.
Yeah.
Right.
Ooh, we're gonna go back to the first one.
I mean, what do we mean when we say growth?
I like it.
What are we talking about? So I think for us, well, for me personally, like it started out like just reading books and like, how do I become better? You know what I mean? Like that was kind of the curiosity.
It was a catalyst, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The catalyst. That's a good point. So like for me, it was reading books and then like whatever I'd read, starting to implement that. Testing it out.
Yeah.
What about you? Like,
I think that's it. It's funny. I don't like to read. Like I hate it.
Really?
Right? I have like very low like ability to just stay too focused. Right?
Yeah.
So like I'm quickly to kind of run off to the
not
next
the
thing. Like
guy?
Not the details guy. I am fast to like squirrel it. Right? If you know what I mean. But what works for me is I love podcast and I love listening to audiobooks. Because I can do that while I'm working out. I can do that while I'm driving. I can do that somewhat, not necessarily multitasking, but for me, that's how I absorb it at a better rate, and I can actually process it. I mean, I'll be working out and I hear a point, and I'm literally like making a quick note in between kind of breathers.
Yeah, that's why I don't always listen to podcasts because I'm always like, oh, that's good. I need to write that down.
It's so good, right? Don't do that while you're driving, by the way. But I think that's what works for me.
Yeah.
And that has allowed me, because when I make those mental notes or those ideas, that's where I can, as Beck said, right? Like it's not about just absorbing it, but then how do you go about implementing it?
Yeah.
And I would say probably 8 out of 10 times, I've brought that back to work or even a personal life. And that's, especially when I go back to work, people are like, some of my guys used to hate me going on vacation because
that's
I come
when
back
we would listen to
all these ideas, right? New
Yeah.
concepts. But anyway, that's what's worked for me, and that's what working on me has meant.
The other thing for me is like, I love like, and it's funny because I've always known this, but I think when we were in Canada, like, do you remember like when there was one day we did like this a values assessment, and I can't remember, I want to say maybe something from Brene Brown, I may be wrong, but like we sat down and I made him do it with me, and he's like, okay, like I don't even know what we're doing here.
But I went with it. I was lifting her up.
Right, you were. But like as we like did this exercise of like what are my top values and what are your top values? Do you remember this?
I do.
And I don't.
Don't ask me what the
specific
values
values I don't remember what my top values were like
which
specifically.
They should really change. But
I could probably get close to it.
Yeah.
But as we were doing that, like one of the things that really came up for me is I love like deep conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So I think like that was a real aha moment for me personally, because I was like, that's one thing we did a whole lot. We'd walk and talk in Canada.
That's all we did is walk.
That's all we did.
It was awesome though.
Yeah, it was super, super awesome. But like, I don't know, for me, like I processed more that way.
Yeah.
And I think that
I think for me, it's like I learned a lot more that way from about you and about us, and
yeah. So
that's the you. I love the pause there, because I think
to pause and come
I think we
that.
probably did glance over that a little too
I think
too
so.
quickly.
And like that's not the only things that you can do, guys. There's tons of other ways to kind of, I don't know, like get to know who you are or what you're about. But I would say it is important to get to
and it'd be good, right? Like if you guys have other ideas or what's worked for you, like put some of that in comments. Share it with this community, because I think that drives, that's the value in what we're trying to do, right? Is
absolutely
not just that it comes from us, but we want to learn from you, and we want others
Yeah.
to learn from you as well. So
Yeah.
so we walk through work on you,
Yep.
give each other the space to grow,
Absolutely.
build each other up. Right?
Yep.
I love that idea about like, hey, when someone comes home, let the other one be the yang to that yin, you're the yang, right?
Oh, yeah,
So
that's good.
love that. And
Uh-huh.
then the last one was, or the fourth, don't get stuck by the stories we tell ourselves. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Oh, so again, this is definitely something that come from Brene Brown, and she says like we're always telling ourselves stories, and which comes from like previous experiences or like things that we've heard or things that we've learned, and sometimes those are true and sometimes not so much. But there was one of them that was super super big when we were we lived in our house previously.
Mhm.
Like literally we were both
Before going up to Canada.
yeah, we were both like at the back. We were in the backyard at the pool.
Which
and,
we had just put in probably a few years before then, 3 or 4 years
Yeah.
before then.
And I don't know why. Like I don't even think like I don't think it was like a pivotal changing moment. Like I think it was just kind of we were like in
in the moment.
in
they were
all the
just-
things.
Yeah.
Like I don't even think like graduation wasn't coming up. Like there wasn't anything big that was going on. We were just like. And both of us kind of had this moment, and I think if I'm not mistaken, like I probably totally just bawled like a baby. But like I was like, this is as good as it gets, right?
And for some like reference, right? We both come from really not a whole lot, and
Yeah.
not to say that we have a lot now,
right,
but to think that we'd have a home on a golf course
yeah,
with a big pool,
yep,
nice car, and just sitting back there going, and it was a beautiful day.
right,
And you're like, this is as good as it gets. That's kind of
Yeah.
like to put it in perspective, right?
yeah,
And then we're like, huh.
yeah. But then
And it was
for-
disappointing in a way, right?
It
That
was
was like,
disappointing.
and it's not that we weren't grateful for what we had.
No,
That's
no,
not
totally.
the point whatsoever,
No, we're
right?
completely grateful. Like so grateful though. But what then I started thinking about is like this is beyond, and we talk about this all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like we say like, well, what did you want to be when you grew up? And I was like, dude, I didn't know any of this was possible.
Right.
Like
Yeah, that's
my
the point,
vision
right?
was like so limited. I mean,
And we surpassed that to
I just
some
didn't
degree.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a lot of research now that talks about like you can only go as far as you can see,
Yeah.
right, in your mind. So that was as far as I'd seen it.
Mhm.
Dude, that was beyond what I had seen. So I think for me it was like, wow. Okay, so then it was like, let me in my mind start like creating like what else could this look like?
Yeah.
And then for me personally, like it became like, let me stop being so selfish, and what's the responsibility that I've been given here? What
Exactly.
am I truly supposed to be doing?
And
in
that's
life?
kind of the shift. And that's
That
really
was the
kind of that
shift.
shift between that moment,
Yep.
our time and our experience up in Canada. And I said this earlier, right? Sometimes you have to change your environment, and we
Yeah.
did.
We did.
We changed the country we lived in, right?
Yeah.
So, but then it forced us to just put things in perspective,
Absolutely.
and really understand like what are we living for,
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah.
we've told a story, and this is where I've said like that moment for me was more of like, hey, it was an awakening to some degree, because
Right.
it helped me force like, instead of going through the motions, and we could have probably, if we didn't make that move, we would probably I don't
It
know
was
where it would have been. It'd taken longer.
We may have gotten there, but it would have
Yeah,
taken
it would have
a
taken
while.
longer, but
Yeah.
we've been able
But
to
we're
fast
always
forward.
hyper, like warp speed,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
learning.
But yeah, I think that's for us, I think has been a pretty critical moment to say, hey, like there is more.
Yeah,
There is, and we've shifted to, we want to add value to others,
absolutely.
more so to ourselves, which
Yeah.
is so much more
Or
fulfilling.
to
frankly.
ourselves for others.
For others, right? Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things too, like as I was looking back at my notes that I thought was super, super interesting. It was funny because guys, Will was sitting over here reading my notes, and I'd written a note about
She
him.
had an crap
I was
moment.
like, oh my gosh, are you reading that? Like I wrote that about you. Thank goodness though, I'd actually told him, but it had taken me a lot to get comfortable to be able to tell him this. But while Dave was talking during this presentation, like he said something that just really struck me, where like I had always been the one that was learning,
Yeah.
right? I was always the one that was reading and telling him about it, and I was the one that was listening to the podcast and then explaining it to him. And but then when like it flipped, like I was super grateful, right? Because I felt like, okay, like now we're in this together. But a part of me was a little bit frustrated because I was like, well, wait a minute, like this is change here,
Yeah.
right? That relationship's changing here. And I wrote down in my book here of like I got to learn how to deal with this,
Yep.
right? Like, how do I then respond, and how do we become learners together? And then what do we do with that so that we can help each other, but also to help others?
Yeah, because I love that transition to this point, right? Because you work on yourself, you give each other space,
Yeah.
you build each other up, you get away from the stories that you're telling yourselves. You're going to reach a point eventually, right?
Yeah.
Ideally, where you're both growing. Now you got to deal
Yeah.
with like that fact, right? Which is like,
Right,
I'm no longer pulling.
Yeah.
Now maybe you may be pushed and or, right? Like walking side by side with someone, and that's different.
That is different.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good different, but
It's a good
again,
different.
it's just change is sometimes a little bit harder to get through, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know, like I'm not always the easiest person
Yeah.
to
Yep.
to accept that change, right? But it's a work in progress too.
And always know, right? Like these 4 steps we just outlined doesn't necessarily always mean that it's going to guarantee someone to be at the same pace that you are.
Absolutely.
But what it does is it allows each of you, right, to grow
Yeah.
at the pace in which makes sense for you and your relationship.
Yeah.
And you've got to provide each other grace as you're walking through this. And
Absolutely.
if it doesn't get to a place where you're both growing at the same like as speed, it's okay, right?
Right.
Because your ambitions, right, may be higher and greater than your partner's. That's fine.
Yeah.
I think what's key is as you're going through that, wherever you are in that stage,
Right.
it's that you are supportive of the other person, right?
Yeah.
As long as that it's a healthy and healthy set of decisions and healthy and respectful kind of I would say relationship.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So, call to action.
Yeah. So what would be the call to action? Well, one, there's 4 things you want to do, right?
Yeah.
So I think the first call to action is, what is the one thing you need to work on?
Yeah.
What is
and
the
I
one
love,
thing?
I love the way you said that too, Will, is like, what is the one thing? Like, I've been listening to a lot of like, a lot right now about like how we can't really focus on everything. Like, there's really not such thing as multitasking. There's not.
No, even though I believe there is, but no.
But like, like once you figure out what that one thing is, then you create the habits around it to be able to successfully do that one thing, right?
Yeah.
And I also learned this, I'm going to share, it's totally random, but
Go for
I
it.
found
Go
it out
for
this week. Did you know that it's actually 66 days to create a habit?
Yes. Yeah.
I thought it was 21.
I heard that based on what she was listening to, so I've been paying attention.
So
No,
I'm
the
sharing
66
with
days,
you.
right?
66 days.
What is the one thing, right,
you can do for
you can do
66 days.
Yeah.
And then when you master it, then add something else.
Yeah. So if it is that, hey, you need to work on you, what's the one thing you need to work on?
Yep.
And then identify the habits that you can do daily, not just like once a week or once a month,
Right.
daily for 66 days.
Yeah.
And work on that.
Yeah.
We would encourage you to, as you do that, I think it's important. You need to share that habit with someone.
Absolutely.
Right?
Accountability.
Accountability is huge. Whether it's your partner, a best friend, a mentor, whatever it may be.
Absolutely.
I think that is going to be a very, it'll be powerful
critical.
for you.
Yeah.
It'll be critical. So just do that one, right?
Yeah.
And we're not going to give you like 4 action items to go do today, tomorrow, whatever.
Absolutely.
One. Just one.
Yeah. But I would also say, like, start telling yourselves better stories.
Yeah.
Right? Start helping yourself to be able to, maybe the one thing is to visualize a bigger dream.
Every day for 66 days, right?
What
First
is
thing
it
in
that
the morning.
you say?
Yeah.
Like, if your dream doesn't scare you, it's not big enough.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's a good one.
Yeah, I love that. And if you do pick a dream one, it's like pick a big one.
Yeah.
Go visit your dreams. I like telling people that too. And
Yeah,
like,
we
if
do
your
that
dream is
often.
like having a big house, then go visit that big house or living in a certain spot or whatever it may be. But pick that one thing that you could either, do every day, see every day, read every day, whatever it may be, meditate every day.
Right.
But that's what we would encourage you to do. That's a big takeaway.
Definitely.
All right. Anything else?
I don't think so. Thank you guys so much for
Thank you.
spending time with us, sharing this space for us. Thank you for allowing us to kind of reflect and talk about, some of our memories and how we've gotten to the places that we are. So
And we're still growing.
we are.
A lot of growth to go after. So.
But also, I encourage you guys, please share in the comments any feedback that you have. Let us know what you're learning. What's the one thing that you've decided?
Subscribe, like, share,
Yeah, absolutely.
all of it.
Thank you guys so much.
Bye guys.
Bye.
Take care.